because you're a young guy, I think 26, and the Pondy Lit Fest started around 4 years back. You would have been around 22. How did doing a task as big and massive as this shape you as a person?
The foremost thinkers of the country who are here for the Lit Fest. So you interact with them and you are constantly around them for those few days. So immediately after it ends, we have several brainstorming sessions with various stakeholders who are involved.
The first edition and the challenges you faced in that edition. Uh, could you give a brief timeline of the things that happened and how you went about handling?
The international media picked it up, the French media. There was this particular correspondent in Delhi who picked it up because they wanted the Alliance Francaise, who had a very good auditorium in Pondy and who had offered it to us for the festival, to pull out of the festival. And so they tried to make an issue out of it in France. And in any case, all of this was going on parallelly for almost, a week or two before the Lit Fest. They wanted to really bring the festival to its knees and finish it off. So our guiding principle from the first edition has been the term Bharat Shakti, which is a term that Sri Aurobindo coined. Basically, the idea is that India realizing her true potential in various ways is something that the world needs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Indic Paradigm. I'm your host, Vineet, on the channel Indic Explorer. We've often wondered in terms of what impact lit fests have, in shaping of socio-cultural opinion in the broader society. And in terms of interactions that people have, different writers, authors, public intellectuals, and they also get to kind of meet regular people, fans, and people who want to read or know about their work, or people who want to discover new authors, right? So there is a lot that happens in a lit fest. To kind of demystify that, with me today, I have a very special guest, Ajit Datta, the main organizer, among the main organizing team of the Pondicherry Lit Fest. Welcome to the show, Ajit.
Thank you for having me, Vinit.
Yeah. So, Ajit, so firstly, I want to start by asking you very specifically personal to you, because you're a young guy, I think 26, and the Pondy Lit Fest started around 4 years back. So you would have been around 22. So, firstly, how did doing a task as big and massive as this shape you as a person?
Oh, that's an interesting question, actually. I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question. But yeah, I mean, of course, there are a lot of aspects to that. Firstly, I have learned a lot in terms of organizing something, in terms of dealing with various aspects of organizing uh, an event, dealing with various kinds of people who are associated with an event like that, because it's not just one kind of people who are associated with that kind of with an event like this. You have speakers, you have the audience, you have your team of volunteers, you have various people who are, you're coordinating on various fronts. So you learn all of that, how to deal with all of that, the fundraising. So it's been a very sort of an all round experience in many ways. And then of course, with the content that you generate, the kind of people whom you meet, especially some of the speakers who are some of uh, the foremost thinkers of the country who are here for the Lit Fest. So you interact with them, and you get to interact with them even later after their sessions, maybe for dinner and things like that. And you are constantly around them for those few days. So you end up learning a lot from them as well. And then you have basically you see that the content that is generated sort of comes out and A lot of people actually benefit from it. Thousands of people watch it. It sort of provokes their minds in a big way. And obviously, if you have played a role in being able to bring that out, it is a wonderful feeling. So all of that shapes you in many different ways. Something like this.
Right. And we will be going a little bit more in detail as we go ahead in this discussion. But so I want to understand some of the work, the back end workings behind doing a Lit Fest. So how do you guys come up with a guest list?
So generally, we have a curator. I mean, not generally, but before this edition, we've generally had a curator. So we had a curator in the first edition. We had two curators in the second edition as well. Now, for this particular edition, we thought that, after having conducted it a few times, let us do it ourselves. Let us curate it ourselves. And we thought of the format, which was quite different from the format that we've used in our earlier editions. And based on that format, we thought of who the best people would be to speak in such a format and with a theme that we had in mind for this year's edition. And the three of us, me and my two co-founders, we pretty much curated the entire event ourselves.
Okay. So you said there's a change in format. So what was that change from
Yeah.
before? And why was that done?
So this edition basically had lectures and have large panel in the sense that these were standalone lectures delivered by the speakers, and they lasted for around half an hour each. And we had a few conversations between two speakers, but that was about it. So we did not have these big panels, discussions, and all of that because firstly the themes sort of were better. I mean, this format was better suited to the themes that we had in mind this year, which was the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo and 75 years of India's independence. So we thought that we could bring in subject matter experts who could focus on particular aspects of both these themes and give us, some kind of detailed quality lecture about it where they went in depth. Because what happens typically with a panel discussion is that it is reduced to every speaker actually only getting the mic for maybe maximum of 7-8 minutes, especially if the panel is big, and it becomes a little bit like your like a 9 p.m. debate or something like that, where it's much more sensational, much more of the superficial aspects being covered and those kind of things. So in order to enhance the quality and of course choose a format that went with the themes this year, we decided to go with this format.
Great. And the
Yeah.
inaugural edition was in 2018, right? So you got 2 years before COVID, and then COVID
Yeah.
happened. So how did your
Mhm.
strategy change? Because before you could fully find your
So
feet, it was
yeah.
disrupted. So what did you do?
Yes. So actually, the 2019 edition was a really big one. It had a lot of big faces. It was televised for the first time, and it really put us on the map. And thereafter, we had really big plans for 2020, but of course, that never materialized because of COVID. So 2020 was a year where everybody struggled a lot. We were not prepared for it at all. So in 2021 we had an online edition. So again, everybody had taken their content online, and the whole format there through Zoom and through other things had gotten completely saturated because literally every platform, every person we know was doing that kind of a thing. So after a few months, it had gotten quite boring, in fact, for people to just sit there and attend these sessions from home. So we actually brought just some of the people who had written books in that year, and we asked them to shoot the videos themselves, 15-20 minute videos about the topic that they had written on, and we posted that on YouTube. Uh, that was it did not go live or anything like that. It was just simply like a YouTube edition of the festival, and it did not do well at all. In fact, it did not get any traction,
This was
and it
2020,
was quite a
right?
failure.
This was
2021.
2021.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So because I mean everybody was doing that kind of thing, so we it did not really stand out as such. So this year we were fortunate enough for things to go back to the physical format, and we were able to return to the physical format properly. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to understand the logistics in terms of in the back end for organizing a festival
Hmm.
from, you spoke about making up the guest. So when does the planning now, let's say you've just come off the current edition. So the planning for
Hmm.
the next year's fest starts right after that. And how is the timeline like from one year to year?
Uh, no, I mean you'll have to define what you mean by planning because
Planning in the sense
there are
that
several.
sure. So now we finished this edition of the Lit Fest, right? So you will be having a next edition next year. So the planning in
Yeah.
terms of what topics, what should be the underlying theme, what kind of guests you will invite, the sponsorships, the logistics.
See, right after an edition ends, there are several takeaways for us. So immediately after it ends, we have several brainstorming sessions with various stakeholders who are involved, and we get everybody's inputs about how it went, how things could have been different, what was right, what worked, what didn't work, the hits and the misses, potential ideas for the next edition, etc. So, in terms of ideating on those fronts, and even sometimes in terms of speakers, topics, etc., we do start taking things down, at least brainstorming right after the
First,
particular edition ends. Yeah, and but yeah, I mean that is still not really an active process as such. The active process probably begins a few months later. Yeah, but then the whole the nature of this thing is such that until the very end you can't really seal anything. So I mean things are constantly changing, they're constantly in flux right until it actually happens. So you don't really yeah, it's quite an organic process.
Right. And how do you plan for, like, in terms of the number of people visiting, not just the panel speakers, but so how has it been? How many people came on the 18 edition, the 19 edition, and this year? Like, how do you plan for that?
Yeah, so actually the number has remained pretty much the same, I'm guessing. I think there would have been around 1500 people in terms of the total footfall. This is, of course, I mean, in terms of people who have walked in, uh, including people who've just walked in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. But yeah, like you have at least a good 500 to 600 people at the venue at any given point listening to sessions.
Got it. Got it. And in terms of sponsorships, how do you actually go about it? When does that process start? And
That process is a bit of a constant process because I mean we obviously that is a very important part of the lit fest because that is something that we cannot do without. So and it comes in various ways from various people. It's not something that is very straightforward and that there is one format that we can use for everyone. So yeah, and it's probably amongst the toughest parts of the festival, raising that raising the money for it. So that's a process that happens parallelly throughout almost.
have you guys ever considered going out of Pondy as well? In the sense that Pondy Lit Fest is a brand which can be
Hmm.
airlifted into any other location as well, right? So the
So
festival,
in fact,
yeah,
yeah, so that was one of the plans for 2020 before COVID came. And obviously we could not go ahead with it. Now we've started our physical editions again. So hopefully in the near future we will be doing that, because there are people who are very interested in different parts of the country, even people outside India who've asked, who are ready to sort of help us out and organize something outside. So we have that kind of interest, that kind of support that we managed to generate outside Pondy as well. So hopefully we will be able to take it out of Pondy quite soon.
Ajit, I think the story of the
Yeah.
Pondy Lit Fest, the most fascinating one is the first edition and the challenges you faced in that edition. Uh, could you give a brief timeline of the things that happened and how you went about handling with them, including till the last minute, the venue, the issues you faced? So, can you take us through the timeline of that?
Well, yeah. So actually, when the Pondy Lit Fest was publicly announced, I think it was for the first time that the entire sort of the in terms of how the political spectrum or the social spectrum in the country is, for the very first time, like the nationalist side on it was coming out with an event like this. And that really perturbed the other side, because in 2014, of course, their political sort of fortress was broken, and then slowly the other fortresses began to break, whether it was the media, whether it was the film industry, and so on and so forth. Slowly, they all began to break. Uh, and this is a fortress that remained very much with them for a long time, because it was always these typical left liberal elite lit fests taking place in different parts of the country, where the usual suspects came together, and they spoke about how backward and how poor India was and those kind of things. And the Pondy Lit Fest obviously was out to break that. We wanted to have a festival where we celebrated India's culture, history. We put out a positive story about the country, and initially the idea was not to call it a lit fest, but then after, and probably we would not have even faced all of this opposition had it not been called a lit fest. But the moment it got, the term lit fest was used for our festival, these people obviously felt very threatened that their fortress is going to break with this festival. It will no longer be that kind of a safe space for them, and so they went out of their way to stop this from happening. So not just at the national level, but even at the international level and the local level, all their assets were sort of activated to stop this festival at any cost. uh, to the point where we were being threatened by the local communists in Pondicherry. Publications were already at it. They were talking rubbish about the festival and things from the very beginning. But then the international media picked it up, the French media. There was this particular correspondent in Delhi who was obviously very close to the left liberal circuit there, and he picked it up because they wanted the Alliance Francaise, who had a very good auditorium in Pondy, and who had offered it to us for the festival, to pull out of the festival. And so they tried to make an issue out of it in France. And in any case, all of this was going on parallelly for almost, a week or two before the Lit Fest. And at that time, we got a lot of advice, from various quarters, that why don't you invite people from the other side? Why don't you back down a bit? Why don't you, project this as a festival which sort of, is about Pondicherry and the whole cosmopolitan, whatever, those kind of stupid ideas. And at that point, some of us definitely, the ones who are running the show today and organizing it, we put our foot down at that point. We said nothing doing. We are going to hit back. We are going to show these people their place. We have nothing to be scared of. We are not doing anything wrong. And if we want to do this in the way that we intended to do it, if we want to have a nationalist lit fest here, we are, damn well going to have it. Who are there to stop us? And that is the attitude that we took and went ahead with that. And every time that an article appeared, we rebutted it, uh, and it generated a lot of excitement, a lot of support for us on social media. It actually made us a much bigger brand than we could have ever imagined. And all of that. So, I mean, and every day we used to hit back, mercilessly hit back. I mean, I have always done that, and I believe that is the way to deal with these people. But yeah, I mean, we kept doing that. And they actually played a big role in our growth. They helped us quite a bit. And the only place where we were affected, of course, was towards the end when Alliance Francaise pulled out and threw us out of the venue. Now, these people obviously sort of conspired and they planned to do it in a very systematic way, and in a manner that would hurt the festival, because there was no reason for them to have done it literally 5 hours before the inauguration of the festival. Uh, they could have done it 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, whenever that piece was published in the French media and all of that. But they chose to do it literally 5 hours before the festival
And you would have had
was to be
some time to
inaugurated.
figure out some alternatives, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they wanted to really bring the festival to its knees and finish it off. Going to deprive us of it at the last moment. All our speakers would be here. Everybody would be here. It's all sorted. It's all organized. The at its very birth, because they thought that they have the best auditorium in the town, and that I mean they of the day nobody was coming to sit at Allianz, and then we would have nothing to show for. So that is what I think they wanted to do. But then they could not, because in those 5 hours, we too sort of went ahead and made alternate arrangements. And those alternate arrangements worked out very well for us, because at the end, process auditorium, right? They were coming to listen to these speakers. So wherever they would have spoken, our audience would have come there to listen to them. And the speakers were also thrilled, because they knew that we were under attack, and that we were you know pulling all our sort of resources together and trying to find a solution to it. And we actually managed to find a solution to it. So they were also very helpful, and it became a wonderful event. I mean, we all felt as if we had really come together and pulled off something against a lot of adversity. And yeah, ever since, it's just been like a trajectory upwards for us.
Right. And this was at, where did the venue move to? The ashram?
So Sri Aurobindo Society, yeah, Sri Aurobindo, not the ashram. It is the Sri Aurobindo Society. So they were kind enough to accommodate us at that point.
And how did the commute, because it's 5 hours, so literally people would have been flying in. And how did the communication happen? Because people would have been kind of lost in Pondicherry. Where is it? So how did you manage that
No,
last end?
Pondicherry is it's a tiny town. It's a very small place. So the building where it took place finally, the Sri Aurobindo Society building, is actually less than a kilometer away from the Alliance Francaise Auditorium, where it
Oh.
was originally supposed to take place.
So that wasn't much of a challenge. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, it was like baptism by the fire, but I'm sure that that kind of helped you guys find your feet early on. But
yeah.
so what I want to ask you is that there was this set of articles between you and Abhijit you had written, I think, on the print, and he was
Yeah.
mentioning about how there is a multiplicity, of opinions and diversity in the Indic side. And you mentioned that while that does exist, there's something that does bind, right? There is a binding glue, which is that, yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Actually, he wrote the article, and he used the term binding glue. So, what he said was that this entire nationalist ecosystem had come down to Pondicherry, and probably like there has never been a gathering of this kind. But that at the same time, there was no binding glue. Like he did not see any binding glue there. In the sense that this was essentially an ecosystem or a group of people that was completely divided and which did not have much in common, and therefore it would be a bit difficult uh, to find a way for everybody to come together and do something together. So that was the gist of his article, and I actually rebutted that because I said that basically I do think that there is a binding glue to all the people who've come here, and that binding glue is basically that everybody here wants to do something good for the country together. I mean, of course, there were other binding glues as well, which other people added later. I think Kushal added later that everybody is a believer of dharma. So that was also a very valid argument. But my argument essentially was that everybody here wants to do something good for the country, and that is what the binding glue is. Now, what it means to do something good for the country, what the country itself means, are things that are completely like debatable, and that is what the debate within the so-called nationalist ecosystem is or has always been. But this is not a left liberal festival where everybody is coming and saying the same lines over and over again and following whatever they follow all the time. This is actually a place where a lot of diversity exists, despite the fact that all of us want to do something good for the country. And that is what sets us apart from the other side, because I don't think we can safely say that they all want to do something good for the country. I don't think they want to, for that matter.
Right. Are there any good stories from the fest? Like, because in a lit fest, people will come network, connect, over a meal or over a drink. And I don't know if any book got written or a collaboration happened because people met at the fest or something like that. Do you know of any interesting tidbit stories uh, of something coming together?
Well, I remember that a lot of things had come together in the first edition of the Lit Fest when I think there was a website at that time called My Nation that Abhijit Majumdar used to run, and so he got a lot of people on board to write and make video shows for them. Even Vivek Agnihotri was onboarded, but then a lot of connections happened in between a lot of people, and that I'm sure has had results in different ways. But yeah, I mean, nowadays the advantage of where we are is that we really don't need a physical gathering like this for collaborations to take place. Those sort of keep happening in any case. So yeah.
You know what? It's a very underrated thing. Like, somehow I feel that meeting face to face, I mean, it can kind of bring people together and lead to newer things.
No, it
It's
does.
a
It does. It's a learning process for a lot of people who are here. There is no doubt about that.
right.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of collaborations, I'm not aware of anything else.
Okay, okay. And you were in the midst of all this also writing a book, right? So for which the book
Oh,
on.
sorry, that is the biggest example of collaboration.
Oh,
Because I got a chance to ask Himantada about the book when he came here for the festival. And
okay.
that is when the writing for the book actually, I mean, that project took off after his visit to Pondicherry.
Oh, this was in 2019.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So then you would have been traveling in and out from Pondi and going to Assam and kind of juggling
Yeah,
between
yeah.
both.
I spent a lot of time there before the pandemic began. Yeah.
Okay, great. But you mentioned that how lit fests previously were very elitist affairs and all of that. So I want to ask you two things. One is what is the general impact, socio-cultural impact at a larger level, at a societal level of these lit fests? What role do you think they play? And the second one, how do you think Lit Fest avoids that trap of just being very elitist?
Yeah. So the first one, of course, I mean, if you go and look at the kind of views that our videos, for instance, generate, I mean, thousands of people are benefiting from the kind of content that this event is churning out. Uh, so you do have that aspect of things. Now, of course, the argument can be made that these thousands still belong to a class that speaks English, that is well educated, etc. But then there is a network effect here. You have a one-stop place where you're finding all of that content, or an event where you find all of that, and it does help people in their journey, in their education, and in sort of spreading an entire host of sort of messages that they receive from the content of the festival. So of course this is not something that has an impact in terms of like affecting, let's say, millions or billions of people, but it does affect people at least in thousands or lakhs. There is that which happens without doubt. Uh, in terms of it not being an elitist affair, simply by the looks of our content, which is definitely not elitist. We are actually discussing things like India's defense and India's economy at the Lit Fest. Where we are headed, what it means for the country. Simple things like that. We are actually televising the sessions for lakhs of people to watch. So this is people who come as part of the audience can speak to the speakers at any point around the festival. So this is not an elitist affair at all. We are actually bringing all of that in one place, all of that content, and we are disseminating it. And the nature of the content itself is something that affects common people in a big way. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that is the key, like how it affects common people's lives. So, finally, what future plans do you have? Uh, is there any discussion going on, brainstorming going on next year's theme? If you can give a slight sneak peek or a clue to that, and
Yeah. So I mean,
any like what
no, I
what
mean we've
future plans you
started.
have 4 5 years down the line? Where do you see this going?
So it's very difficult to say, because each literally every edition comes with its own set of challenges, and not a single edition has been the same as a previous edition. I mean, they have been massively different in various ways, and we have to deal with it as it comes. However, as I told you, we want to take it to other places. We want this itself to become bigger. So those plans are obviously very generic plans, but they exist. I mean, those are more of like guiding principles or objectives towards which we intend to work. As of now, for the next edition, of course, we have started brainstorming about the hits and misses of this one. Let's see where that takes us. That's just a starting step for next year's Lit Fest. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we will build on that.
Right. And one more thing, because all three of you, the organizers, you've all grown up at the Aurobindo Ashram, right? And in some way or the
Hmm.
other, there's always been that association of this Lit Fest with
Yeah,
the Aurobindo Ashram, and especially this year, the theme
with
itself
Aurobindo,
was
yeah.
with of Sri Aurobindo. So how it's
Hmm.
like almost Sri Aurobindo's shadow looms large on the Lit Fest. And is there
Yeah.
anything specific of this Lit Fest that informed, like that had a lot to do with Aurobindo and his teachings, or something that kind of connected the thread with his philosophy?
So our guiding principle from the first edition has been the term Bharat Shakti, which is a term that Sri Aurobindo coined. Uh, basically, uh, basically, the idea is that India realizing her true potential in various ways is something that the world needs. So that potential, or India in that state, having realized that potential or what India carries is the Bharat Shakti. So that has been the guiding principle or the guiding theme for all our editions so far. And even and this time, of course, our specific theme was 150 years of Sri Aurobindo, his 150th birth anniversary, which was on the same day as our 75th Independence Day. So, yeah, I mean, so we had several sessions dedicated to Sri Aurobindo.
Right. I think with that, we come to the end of our chat. Thank you so much for giving time, Ajit, and taking us through the through all the hard work that you guys put in year on year. And I hope that this festival flourishes and grows even more and becomes really big in the coming years. Uh, yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Vineet, for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So with that, we come to the end of the show, guys. Do like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like this episode. So until next time, when we see another guest, always remember, Dharma rocks. See you around.